So much. We just have a great honor being able to share personal experience. And, my hope is that there's a mutual kind of encouragement to be able to see it in growing condition that's happening globally. And because it is dealing with the mind, it's not a physical disease where one can see a broken bone and then subjectively see its healing. So when you do have the brain that's processing healing, but the brain is the organ that is sick, it makes it very difficult in the journey to recognize objectively how progress is taking place. So I just want to take this opportunity to be able to encourage others or caretakers or patients themselves.
Goodness. Thank you. Over to you.
Yes, absolutely. So I just call September 4th, 2024, the day that my brain broke. So I am almost to 8 months recovery. So just here in about a week, I will be 8 months recovery from viral encephalitis. So the professor from St. John Hopkins was brilliant, very, very informative, especially for those of us who are science nerds as well, to be able to see just the beauty, but yet the complexity of the 3 pound organ that is inside of all of our craniums. I'll just give you a backstory of what my journey looked like. So for me specifically, I was not an immunocompromised individual. So this was not me having major issues or sicknesses in my childhood. In fact, across the board, I was what we would say relatively healthy. And what ended up happening to me here in America, we celebrate something called Labor Day at the end of our summer. And on Labor Day, which was a Monday, would become the last memory that I had in this journey before a few weeks. It started out for me as just having flu-like COVID symptoms. So high fever, feeling very tired, having all kinds of GI issues, vomiting. And what ended up taking place is Monday, I had a really severe headache in the back of my head, very, very severe. And I just kept telling my family that this was something different. So subjectively, you can feel that this is different. Something's happening in my body that was different than what I'd experienced previous to this. And by Tuesday, I went to the doctor. I was dismissed as being, hey, you have no flu, you have no COVID. This will just be a virus that runs its course. And of course, by this point, the virus had already crossed the blood-brain barrier and was attacking the back of my brain, unbeknownst to me. By Wednesday, I woke up, or my wife woke me up, my eyes rolled back in my head, and I passed out. And at this point, she called 911, of which the ambulance came and picked me up, and they took me to the hospital, of which I am so deeply thankful because I have 3 kids. I've been married for about 20 years. I have a 15-year-old, a 12-year-old, and an 8-year-old. And I'm so glad that they did not witness what was about to take place. So as I was in the emergency room triage, I had my first grand mal seizure, really, really large seizure. And the physicians basically just put me to sleep for the next 24 hours. And in that, they did MRIs, they did spinal taps. And for here in the United States of America, as you just heard the professor so eloquently speak of, they tested for 45 different known viruses and they all came back negative. And so it was encouraging for me to hear that there's about a third of those patients that they never determined the actual specific virus. And because there was no known virus, they let me stay in the hospital for a few more days, about 5 days total, and then they dismissed me from the hospital. Now, hindsight is 2020. I wish they would have never dismissed me from the hospital and were able to determine, I know the antigen sometimes shows up later, but to determine based on the MRI that the inflammation had already begun in my brain. And so when I got home, I immediately had another grand mal seizure. I was very disoriented. And so the EMTs were called and I went back into the hospital. And many of you know Susanna Callahan's story. You've probably seen the Netflix documentary, Brain on Fire. And one of the neurologists came into my hospital room where, again, I have no memory of this, but said, I have a sneaky suspicion that encephalitis is taking place. So they put me in another MRI, and it was determined that I had encephalitis. But the encephalitis was not attacking the parietal lobe or the temporal lobe. It was the occipital lobe, which is, of course, responsible for all the visual realities. And so at this point, I just began to go blind. I was unable to see anything in front of me. And one of the things I think is unique about viral encephalitis as it relates to, or in comparison to autoimmune encephalitis, is that oftentimes you hear with autoimmune is that it's a slow progression. So someone who has a disorientation or maybe they're depersonalization, or they're having these deep extreme fatigue, and it happens over several weeks. For me, I was sick one day, or I was healthy one day, sick the next day, and instantly viral encephalitis caused all kinds of symptoms. And for me, that was blindness because of the occipital lobe, and then it was seizures. And so what happened in the hospital is I began to have seizures about every 10 minutes. And so this is where my family began to get worried, because they would throw one seizure medication at me that would not help. They would throw a second seizure medication, the third seizure medication, the fourth seizure medication. And then, thank God, on the fifth seizure medication, it caused the brain to begin to calm down. If that wouldn't have happened, then of course they would intubate me and then put me in an induced coma to allow the brain to rest. And so the fifth medication enabled me to at least slow down on the seizures. And of course, as a patient, I have the EEG cap, and they're doing all of the monitoring. And then from there, I spent about a month in the hospital. And in that month in the hospital, I did have the corticosteroids, as the professor spoke about. So it was like 1,000 milligram bags of prednisone. And then I had the IVIG treatment. And I'll just tell you this for caretakers: the first memory I have from before Labor Day to being in the hospital was when they began the IVIG treatment. And for me, when they started the treatment, they started the drip too quickly. And so when it went in intravenously, I thought I was dying. I literally thought I was dying because I was having an allergic reaction to the treatment. And so what was happening is my vision was closing in, and it felt like very much like you were about to pass out. But then the pain in the body was so severe that I just began to shout out that I have 30 more seconds to live, or 10 more seconds to live. And so this is, of course, very frightening for caretakers. So they brought in the rapid response team, and they did the certain protocol to enable it to slow down and give me what was needed to stop the allergic reaction. And then over the next few weeks, it's just a matter of trusting that this is going to work. And so thankfully, with my experience, I'm 39 years of age. In my research, it's a lot of times in young folks, or it's a lot of times in people that are older in life. And so I'm in that kind of weird stage of life that I contracted this virus. And so several weeks later, I was able to get out of the hospital and make it back home. But I remember it being so disorienting because I could not remember where my house was. I could not remember what my house looked like. I couldn't certainly remember the people that were in my life other than my family, who their names were. And I came home. I'll never forget this for all of my life. Did not know where utensils were, what the kitchen looked like, relearning what was taking place in my home. And I just began to encourage, for those of you who are, whether you're coming through viral encephalitis or even autoimmune encephalitis, is that you have to really be gracious and patient with yourself. I am a very patient person with everyone else, not really patient with myself. And so very early on, because they sent me home with more steroids, the steroids caused all kinds of issues. Like the doctor had mentioned about even the sores, I have a constant reoccurrence of these sores, the herpes complex. And so that, because of the suppression of the immune system, I had 13 different sores in my mouth. And then one of the things that I very rarely get to hear about from people's post-encephalitis recovery is the extreme night terrors and nightmares. Because of, I think, many of the side effects of the medication, this was the hardest part of my recovery. And now I'm 8 months in, and to this day, I have not had one night of sleep where I have not had incredibly vivid dreams. I mean, vivid dreams down to being able to see the color of someone's hair and being able to remember these dreams. And so they incited so much anxiety in me that I had to go back to the ER for panic attacks. And so it's just a long journey. Sometimes we want that journey of healing to happen overnight, but you have to really, really be patient with yourself. One of the things I always encourage folks now is I've joined several Facebook groups and other online groups to try to encourage other people, because I think that even though I had such incredible family members with support, I'm a very social person. If I would have had someone who had gone through encephalitis themselves and could be able to meet with me or talk with me and with great authority say to me, I know you think your life is gone and that your brain is forever lost and that you'll never recover, just hang on day by day. You have to take it minute by minute. In my worst days, I took it 10-minute segments. If I can make it 10 more minutes, Rather than thinking a day, I would take it 10 more minutes. And if I could make it 10 more minutes, then I would take the next 10 minutes. And as a patient, you have to really do this resting and pacing. So just listen to your body. You don't want to stay completely immobile, especially if you deal with great anxiety, because the enemy of anxiety is activity. So you want to move. You don't want to be locked up internally. But you have to listen to the body, this resting and then pacing. Of course, one of the things that most people talk about is fatigue, the mental stamina and the mental endurance. I've just now began to go back to work, and the person that I was previous to encephalitis is not the person that I am post encephalitis. I tell you, another wonderful thing to do for those of you who are caretakers or patients is to keep a daily diary. Now, I know a lot of you have a hard time writing. I had a hard time writing because of the tremors. So take your phone and dictate to your phone, because this will help you. Is that because you're subjective to the suffering, you don't realize how quickly you are improving or the ways in which you're improving. But if you can look back over a month or 2 months at your diary and how you felt day to day, it will serve as a great encouragement to you to say, hey, I'm actually improving. But just know that encephalitis recovery is not this way. The trajectory is like a couple steps forward and then maybe 3 steps back. And then you might take 4 steps forward and then 2 steps back. But you will see over the gradual trajectory that there is an increase in the healing journey. I think this goes without being said, but good nutrition. Meeting with my own neurologist, I was taking turmeric and anything I could do to try to quell inflammation in the body. Another thing that was very helpful for me is social interaction. I know so many people in their journey of recovery feel so isolated. And so it's great to have recovery groups. I know Encephalitis International has incredible peer groups. So social interaction helps you. We are relational beings. We're made this way. And so when we isolate ourselves, especially in recovery, that can make things extremely, extremely difficult. Be patient with yourself, as I spoke to earlier. I think what makes encephalitis sometimes so much more frustrating than other sicknesses is that it is an invisible disease. And so outwardly, you might be looking like you're improving very quickly, but inwardly, those of us who've been through this realize you feel inwardly differently than you appear outwardly. And so, one of the things that's very frustrating is that people will see you, and as you're improving, they'll say to you, "Oh, for me, I'm Craig. The old Craig is back," and there is nothing more frustrating to hear than, "Oh, the old Craig is back," because you are changed. In America, we have these euphemisms as if we're not supposed to age. You look at a 65-year-old woman and say, "You don't look a day over 45." But that's really an ignorant statement. We as humans are called to change, we grow older. And so for the person who's experienced encephalitis, we realize life is different. And so there's an acceptance. And I know that sounds weird maybe, but there's an acceptance of the new normal. You have to learn to love the new normal. You can't consistently think day by day, I'm going to get back to the old me. It's a journey. It's a suffering journey that transforms us and changes us. And then I tell you from my own experience that it gives you an incredible amount of empathy for people. And this is an empathy that you don't have to manufacture or make up. This is something that genuinely flows out of your own experience. For me as a child, I was so passionate about Dr. Carson, Ben Carson, one of the great neurosurgeons that was the first to separate conjoined twins at the head. And I never knew that I would have to experience encephalitis to love the brain even more. But it truly is a really, really incredible journey to go on. And if you are experiencing it or you're a caretaker, it's going to require a lot of patience for you, because one of the things that I read about in social boards and interaction boards that a lot of times does not get talked about with encephalitis is the sense of the inability to process information. So when I was in the hospital, the doctors would come in, and you as a patient want to understand what's happening, but you cannot process what's happening in the room. The brain cannot keep up. And so the doctor.
Craig, we've lost your sound.
Can you hear me now?
That's fine. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. I would just say that as you are recovering, there is a difficulty in processing what's happening around you. So, as an individual who is an advocate for the patient, is to really be your best advocate. So, when you go into your neurologist appointment, don't let him go 5 minutes in and out, but really seek to get your questions answered. But when you're recovering from encephalitis, you cannot get into a room and understand really what's happening. The processing of the brain is so much slower. So what I began to do is ask my spouse or my parent to say, hey, when they leave the room, you're going to have to explain this to me in a much slower pace, because the brain's ability to process, again, is so much slower than when you are in a healthy situation. And for me, I guess the last thing I say, and I'll take questions, is that the integration of my faith to my healing journey was the greatest part. For me, I'm a Christian. I'm a Jesus Christ follower. I'm actually a pastor of a Christian church. And so it's my belief theologically that God, when we call out to him, either he redeems in a way that is a complete removal or a redemption. And in my experience, is a redemption. It was Psalm 23, which is one of our great scriptures, is that essentially says some days we're going to live next to green pastures and still waters, and other times we're going to walk through the valley of the shadow of death. But with my integration of faith, it was a daily trust that Jesus Christ was going to continue to lead me through this process. And 7 months later, I'm still having residual issues. You know, with encephalitis, it's like you improve pretty quickly, 90%, and then the last 10% takes a long time. So even though my occipital lobe, I had an MRI last week, is showing inflammation going down in the brain, I'm still having visual disturbances where I will go blind for a minute or two. I'll have headaches in ways that I didn't have headaches. Thankfully for me, I've not developed epilepsy post recovery up to this point. So, but I'm still going down from 5 anti-seizure medications to 2 medications. And so each time as you wean off the medication slowly, because you'll experience emotional changes and behavioral changes very quickly if you come down off of those medications quickly. And so I just want to avail myself, for those of you who are with Encephalitis International or Facebook groups, to feel that you can have peer cooperation and encouragement, because daily I'm interacting with somebody about something of the condition or coming off the medication or the side effects of the medication. And so that's a little bit of my journey. I'm still in the journey, but we're on month 8 of the journey, and I could not be more grateful for just the opportunity to share today, and then also serve as just a fellow encouragement for those who are still suffering from this incredible challenge disease. So with that, I'll just pause and thank you again for allowing me to share.